As promised, we have the T42 in World of Tanks, and this is the other vehicle, much like the K91-2, that you could have picked up for free as part of the Holiday Ops operation, and I guess we'll review it to see whether or not it was worth picking up. And right next to us is the other tank that you could have picked up, which was the CS52 Lys. Once again, a pretty solid tank, and right now, as the rundown of this vehicle, it is a solid performer. I've really enjoyed playing it. The best game that I had was when I wasn't recording, because of course, but we've got two replays here that are somewhat good and showcase what the tank is all about, and even in some of the worst case matchups that you can be in, tier 10, this first one being top tier, the next one being bottom tier, and quite heavily from what I can remember. But the T42 in general is essentially, if you imagine an M41 Walker Bulldog that is slower, but is kind of more like a medium, better gun statistics, more reliable, and if you really enjoy the looks of the M41 Walker Bulldog, then the T42 is a very nice looking one as well. But the key thing about this tank is just the consistency, and I've said it already and I'll say it again, this tank is very, very consistent. It is a solid performer, it will consistently be reliable. Is it a hardcore carry tank? Absolutely not. I don't think that this tank is going to be able to carry super hard in a ton of games. You can certainly have really good games and you can carry your team in terms of whilst you're there, but if it's a kind of last minute battle for trying to win the game and there's, you know, you versus maybe a couple of tanks on the enemy team, it's kind of difficult to make this tank work 100%, because at the end of the day you've got this M41 Walker Bulldog sort of armor on the hull. It's also huge, like in terms of the hull armor, which means you get penned quite a lot, but its turret kind of reminds me of the STA-1 or the STA-2, you know, this kind of weird kind of M41 esque turret that's slightly beefier. It's got a little bit more armor than something like the Walker Bulldog, but you can still get penned quite reliably in the turret by most people. But you can use this as like a Ridgeline Warrior, also a spotter, because the view range in this tank is really good, and so you're kind of in the region of being like that aggressive medium that has to be involved but needs team support for the majority of the battles to make it really work. And it's a fairly slow burner. It was a tank that I wasn't entirely sure if I'm going to love it or hate it or what the real story was going to be, but it's definitely a tank I find to be in a decent position right now, and that's really what it's all about, is picking a tank that is kind of the underdog. And I always like playing in the underdog tanks. It's all well and good playing in something like the Turan where you can ruffle stomp 9,000 damage without a care in the world. But it's something different when you're playing in a tank that, you know, you don't see a whole host of players playing, or even if you do, you know, not having the best of games in it. But that's what we're kind of trying to do with these videos, is to showcase some of the weird and wacky tanks that are in World of Tanks, and that you don't have to play these super meta tanks to come away with good results, and it's down to the player that actually plays them. You know, you can make any tank in the game work, you just have to make sure that you are kind of playing it in a way that is inducive to the actual tank that you're playing. So you're seeing me here just performing a little bit of a recon on the K91 for the well, the K91-2, which is the previous video that we've done on the channel. But of course, in my opinion, the difference between the two is that the K91 just has that little bit of something extra. I feel like this is probably more consistent, like we've said, but it's not that enjoyable in a lot of the games, because you don't feel like you've really got a pack-a-punch, or that you can kind of out DPM everything. You've got a longer reload than what you have in the K91. You feel a lot more sluggish in this tank, like you're probably looking at about 40 kilometers an hour, which when you're playing in a tank like this, which is quite bulky, quite big, the armor isn't great, it's just not very nice to kind of advance with. So you're seeing me here just trying to pick apart some opponents. You're seeing some rounds come in from the bushes over there, so I'm just trying to find someone who might be there, and in doing so we actually get hit by someone, so we return the favour and of course hit them back. So now they only did 100 and something damage to us, so I'm very, very glad that we managed to hit them back. But at this point I'm thinking, you know what, the game is a victory. Like, there is no way we're throwing this against the opponent. So I make a little bit of a kind of a movement over to the right hand area. I don't really want to get spotted and all of the tanks that are camping under the bridge to start appearing, and we don't know what exactly it was that hit us earlier for like 100 damage. Maybe it was someone firing HE, I have no idea, but we managed to spot the IS-6, get a little bit of assistance damage and start pushing in. And this is really the aim of the game with the T-42. Now we're up to 50 kilometers an hour, so you can get up to top speed, but like I said, starting from 0 and moving forward, it's just sluggish and it's just not very nice. And you can see here back down to 35 kilometers an hour, and this is just a consistent theme of playing these tanks. And so you're really relying upon the fact that you preemptively move in the game, which probably makes it a little bit harder for newer players or players less experienced to come away with like a solid victory or anything like that. So you've got to make sure that you're making your shots count when you do get there, and you're also making sure that you don't just kind of YOLO in. Now we're going for the shot onto the upper plate of the King Dragon. It's the biggest target. We've got plenty of pen with this tank to be able to deal damage, 268mm with the premium ammunition, and with the operation going on right now, there's absolutely no way in any way, shape or form that we're going to lose money, so it might as well try and make our game get as good as possible. So we picked up, what, like 4,500 combined damage, which is fairly okay. And so you're going to earn a lot of silver in this tank, in this game. So there's no problem with that. And at this point, it's just a case of trying to secure as many damaging hits as possible before the game ends. And talking about game ending, there it is. We finish off the last tank in the game, the Panzer 58 Mutz, and come away with a victory. So a really nice end to the game. We came top on experience with 1,760, 3,500 damage, 1,700 exact assistance, so 5,200 combined damage, 1.15 million silver for that game, and a pretty easy ruffle stomp on Prokhorovka. Now, not every game is like that, and where you're top tier and you can kind of sit out in the open. Some games you are, of course, bottom tier, and I expect most of you are bottom tier more often than not. And so we've got to showcase a game where maybe things don't go our way in terms of the matchmaker, and we have to face up against tier 10s. And can this tank actually do it? And the short answer is yes, but you get entirely outclassed by tanks that are a higher tier than you, especially mediums. They will just ruin your day. There's not really a way in which you can come out with a victory. If you're going 1-for-1 with a medium tank, they will pen you every time. You can only do 240 damage per shot or 280. And you're really focusing on just essentially remaining undetected and really acting as a support tank. If you're playing it as a super aggressive tank in a tier 10 game, it's not going to work. In a tier 8, maybe more so, and against tier 6 and 7s, then 100% you can. But yeah, in a game like this, not so much. Now, at this point, I'm thinking, you know what, like the majority of their team, the majority of the higher tier vehicles are over on the left, so might as well push forward and get some damage on some easy people. And with our light tank pushing up fairly quickly, and with no one in the town area on the enemy team, at least at this current moment in time, then we can get into this position to avoid taking any kind of hits to our damage per minute, because we need to keep this gun firing, otherwise we're going to have a terrible game. So we're making sure that we're in range of the people that have got spotted. Unfortunately, don't manage to pen the Demolisher because, I mean, I don't know. And then the general comes out kind of in the open, and then we hit the Panzer 58 Mutz, tracking him and getting some assistance damage, so lovely. Now the FV 4005 on the enemy team is sat out in the field area directly in A7. So I pull back a little bit. I don't want to get hit by the FV 4005. It is going to go terribly if we do. Probably shouldn't have fired there against the general, but I wanted some damage because the game is wrapping up fairly quickly with 13 to 11, and it could go either way. So we need to get as many people out of the way so we can then deal with the people that might push our base. And at this point I'm thinking, well, we can push forward, and there's an FV 4005. I just need to make sure that I can go behind cover and just avoid the shell entirely, whilst also making sure that I am far enough forward so that we can get some damage as it kind of transpires, and that where we can get some damage. So FV 4005 out in the open, we hit one more time, so a nice little 500 damage picked up on him, and now it's time to just progress towards the rest of the enemy team. And in doing so, what we can do is I'll show you a position that's nice once you push this area if you have the opportunity to get to it, and sometimes it's worth taking a hit to be able to get there, but you do have to kind of hope for one thing, and that is there is no one sat where the equalizer is that isn't an artillery piece on the enemy team, and that there isn't a ton of people camping on the corner in front of where the King Dragon are and the T-44. So there appears to be just one tank, and it's very, very low health, so there's no real risk in crossing. Now there is a Canonian Jagdpanzer who misses us, which is perfect, and we actually managed to hit him on the move because I had a wargaming. And then 2,500 damage has been done, 3k combined, and we've got an Object 277. Not particularly the funnest tank to go up against with this, since 268mm of penetration on the turret is a kind of a risky shot. It's not necessarily risky if we were to get the lower plate or something, but yeah, it's definitely not an easy shell. But this is the position that I was on about, in terms of if you can get here with the enemy team, they really can't do anything. Things like the Chieftain sat out in the open, going for the tracking shot on him to get any assistance that we possibly can, because the game is very quickly running out, and with the Chieftain now moving, I make a terrible shot there against him. But the game literally ends so quickly in this game. So the T-42 typically will do well as a support tank, but like I said, it's not really that great in the bottom tier games where you have to be aggressive and push. So you do rely on your team quite a lot, and you can end up losing quite a few games because of it. But other than that, that is the T-42, really a decent tank. And if you haven't already checked out the K91-2, I highly recommend you check it out on screen right now. There'll be a video link that you can click on the screen, and on the right hand side will be the gameplay and tank reviews playlist with all of the tanks we've recently featured, including the new Spatuk, as well as all of these tanks that we are reviewing. And as soon as the CS52 list, that will come out on the playlist as well, so keep an eye out for that. And if you don't want to keep an eye out on the playlist, then subscribe, because you'll be notified when it goes live. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.